It is such an honor to be here. I will admit, first of all, I know it's past Labor Day. I'm sorry I'm wearing white, but I bought these shoes 3 weeks ago, a week before. This is my 2-week anniversary of my wedding. So I know. 2 weeks ago at this very moment, I was partying it down right around the corner at our wedding reception. So I just had to wear them one more time. Ladies, aren't they cute? I see you, young man in the front. You think they're cute too. It's okay. If you admit it, Jason Whitlock won't hear you. He's not here. It's fine. It's fine. I promise. You and your Packers shirt. Okay. What's that? Oh, it's Georgia Bulldogs. Honey, my reading glasses are over there. I know. It's a similar G, right? Packers. Okay, I'm gonna leave and I'll come right back. We'll start over. I mean it. It is a real honor to be here in so many ways. I love you, girlfriend. Yeah, I think everyone before me has said it so beautifully and eloquently. Everything changed on September 10th. I do think it is and will forever be one of those remember where you were moments when President Trump was shot on July 13th last year, 9/11. So many moments where, unfortunately, we'll never forget where we were. I was on my honeymoon, and my goodness, the first thing I thought of after, of course, Charlie and Erica, who I had been blessed to get to know over the last couple of years since I got a big mouth on me suddenly. It was an honor to learn from them. I immediately thought of this event and Pastor Allen and just praying that you would still have it. And it didn't take me long to realize, you're darn right he will. Absolutely. And that is because we need it now more than ever. I think we know that. And I am feeling, I hope you are too, throughout the country, it's different. Yes, there's darkness, but I am so grateful to see some of the joy that is coming from an awful situation because so many more people, my college-age kids, are turning to Jesus and trying to begin to renew their relationships because of something so horrible. So thank you for having us here. A couple of years ago, I would never, ever have guessed that anybody would invite me to come to a church to speak. It is amazing, though, what happens when you stop living in fear, when you stop being afraid to be yourself, even if it isn't the popular thing that you're being told in the media, and when you are no longer afraid to focus on going deeper in your faith, even in your quiet moments. Sometimes that can be scary too. So I just want to take you through my crazy journey a little bit and share what I have found is throughout the last couple of years since I gained my freedom from Disney, ESPN, ABC, is that every time I've talked about some of the fears I had, I get notes and messages from people or someone coming up to me in the airport saying, oh my gosh, me too. And so it's a victory for us when we are vulnerable with it, but more importantly, we're allowing others to realize that they're not alone. So that's what I hope that you take from all of this, these last couple of days, is to realize that we gotta go, we gotta talk about it. But I have a dream. My dream was when I was 11 years old in 1980, I was 12, 1984, do the math, and I was watching the Los Angeles Olympics. And I grew up in a sports family, and I said, I know I'm not gonna be a good enough athlete to do any of that, sadly, but I'd like to talk about it because I want to be around greatness and I want to be around sports. Everybody's happy. That's when everybody comes together for that 60-minute football game on a Sunday or whatever it is. Sports unites. Color, politics, religion, socioeconomic status, none of it matters in sports, right? That is the most diverse place, and I wanted to be a part of that. So that's when the dream began. And I worked super hard. College, even though it took me 5 years. Local TV, on TV during the day, waiting tables at night, very glamorous, not so much at times, and I loved every second of that grind. Regional TV after all the locals, and in 2007, I got to ESPN. And I fulfilled that dream that when you have that dream as a young girl in the 1980s, a girl a girl who looked like me, frankly. That was impossible. And I remember my first sports center. It was awful. I don't know why they kept me at that moment, because I was so nervous. I was terrible, but I did it. And that was in 2007. The challenges before and after are challenges now that I actually love and wouldn't change any of them. And looking back, every one of them was God. I just didn't know it at the time. All of this actually began as a kid. My dad went to West Point, 1970 graduate of the United States Military Academy. No, I will tell him that's for him, because it took me 5 years at a state school, so I didn't get those genetics apparently. But as a kid, we were raised strict, discipline, Saturday morning room inspection, not 9 o'clock, 0900 hours, you salute when he knocks twice, and every infraction, like if your bed's not made, you drop and give him 10 push-ups. So I had beautiful arms from a young age because I did a lot of push-ups. And he made sure that as kids, we memorized one particular part of the Cadet Prayer that he was forced to say thousands of times at West Point. And I do have a picture of it here, if we could pop it up. I'd love for you to see this and not just hear it. Make us to choose the harder right instead of the easier wrong, and never to be content with a half-truth when the whole can be won. As kids, it's annoying. And as adults, it can be annoying too. Certainly the teenagers, right? Because we usually do know what the harder right is. It's easier to do the other thing. And he made us say that literally thousands of times. Again, it carried with me throughout my career, and I want to share a couple of these instances to you so you can understand the battle, and one that I think we all can share. I started at ESPN in 2007, but in 2004, that's when I got the first phone call from ESPN. I was working in Washington, D.C. I'd made it up to regional. I was the main sports anchor, and I also covered the Baltimore Ravens. I was doing it all. I had a 20-month-old at home, and I was like 9 months pregnant with my second. And the call came. And I took the train from D.C. up to Hartford and Bristol, Connecticut, and did the audition. And when you're 12 months pregnant and someone's, a human is bouncing on your bladder, you don't care about the audition. It's like, let's just go, I got this. It was the best audition I ever did because of, sorry, that was graphic, but you remember what it was like being pregnant. I know. I crushed that. And I got back to DC, and my agent called, and she said, you got the job. And little Sage went back to that 11-year-old kid in 1984 who was like, oh my gosh, I did it, and I'm so proud, and I'm really pregnant. And I wanted a third kid too. Do y'all remember Stuart Scott? Booyah. I say the greatest sports center anchor that ever lived, and he was my big brother. Stuart Scott was my person. Stuart Scott believed in me a lot longer before I ever believed in myself. And before I got to ESPN, probably in 2003, I guess, I had met him. We had the same agent. And he came up to me and he's like, I'm watching you, and I see you're having all these babies. Love it. Just know that when you come to ESPN, and someday you're going to make it, you should probably be done with that chapter of your life. And he was just trying to protect me, because it was very different there in 2004, 5, 6, 7 for women, and for women who were trying to be a mother and balance all the things that I look forward to the panel with Jason Whitlock later to talk about. I love him, and he knows it, and we'll chat. But anyway, I struggled with exactly what Jason was saying, though, because there's so much truth in what he's saying. And I grew up where family is everything. As an Army kid, I don't have a home. By the time I was 11 years old, I lived in 4 different countries, spoke 4 different languages. If you count 1 to 10 in 4 languages, does that mean that I could speak fluently? I say yes. And so I had no idea. And family was everything. And what am I gonna do? Stop having kids? I wanted one more. I had to finish this one, but wanted one more. And stop having kids and go after my career dream? Or do I focus on my family and take a chance? So I called my agent, talked to everyone in my family, certainly my parents, and said, I can't do it. I'm gonna turn it down. And my agent, God bless her, she was just looking out for me and doing her job as an agent to get me the next job and get me a little more money in my pocket. And she said, sweetheart, I respect what you're doing, but you have to understand something. ESPN does not need you. You need ESPN. and you will be blackballed if you turn this down. No one turns down ESPN. And I prayed about it, and I was scared to death because I thought she was right. I prayed about it, and I took a chance and said no thank you, and had that baby a month later, and 2 years later I had another baby, and knew I was done then. And in 2007, guess who called back? ESPN called back. And who knows? I mean, I got lucky. Obviously, it's bigger than that, but it was a risk that I was willing to take based on how I was raised with family. And I knew deep down it was the harder right to choose family first. You hear people all the time on their deathbed, right? That, gosh, I wish I hadn't worked so much. And I had that running through my head. And as a mother, I couldn't regret. If I was blessed enough to be able to have children, am I gonna stop to go do a job in an industry that's so subjective? Who knows when they get sick of me and kick me out? So it was my first really big test with the harder right. Fast forward way ahead, started in 2007 and then got to do it all, and the Masters and Super Bowls and the World Series and NBA Finals, and oh my gosh, working with incredible people at ESPN, athletes, everything, like the biggest blessings and well beyond any of my dreams. And then the world changed in 2016 in particular when a certain person was elected. And for a network that had pounded into us, no politics, you cannot go on social media, you cannot talk about anything political. And then all of a sudden in 2016 when Donald Trump got elected, I'm looking at Twitter and I see my bosses online spewing hatred about him that day of the election. And I was so confused. I'm like, wait, you said none, and now you're my bosses and you're doing it. But, I'm not gonna say anything. I have a family to support. Fast forward to 2020 when the world really changed. Personally, I had gone through a lot of changes. My 20-year marriage ended. I had 3 kids in junior high and high school. All at the same time, COVID hit. George Floyd, Black Lives Matter. Really, to me, the biggest change, a change from which we still have not recovered. And with all this happening, my peers on air, who think very differently than I do, and that's fine. However, they began to express their opinions on air. And then they decided that they're gonna have a race and sport special and have all, most of the, prominent or the main SportsCenter anchors come together on a panel. And it wasn't just SportsCenter, it was NFL Live, and it was reporters who were gonna come together, all black, on a panel to speak about race and sport. And no one told me about it. I found out through a friend of a friend, white people at ESPN, who said, just so you know, they're having this race and sports special with all your black peers. And I heard one of the people that was gonna be moderating, laughing that she made sure that you weren't a part of it. At the time, I was the longest tenured female SportsCenter anchor at the network. Linda Cohn was still there, but not doing SportsCenter at the time, and she's incredible, by the way. She was one of my idols growing up. But I was the longest tenured female otherwise. I was the only woman of color doing SportsCenter full-time at that point. I was the highest paid female at the network. And for some reason, I was excluded from that. And I found out, and I called the president, who I had a good relationship with, and I said, Jimmy, what's going on? And he said, I don't know anything about that. Long story short, I was excluded. And I found out that 2 of the anchors went to the bosses and said, she is not respected in the black community. She's not black enough to be part of this panel. I said that and a few other things, I'm sorry. And then I'm like, please tell me what exactly that means to not be black enough. Granted, I'm biracial, I'm half white, so I guess I'm not, do the math here. I mean, tell me what the qualifications are. It had nothing to do with that, because as a biracial woman, I'm darker than some of the people who are all black on that network. It was about what I believed. And that devastated me. But I didn't say a word to anyone else. Somehow it leaked, and I got a call from the Wall Street Journal. And it was a moment for me. And I talked to my agent at the time, who was incredible. And he said, Sage, this might be the time. And at that moment, I knew that I wasn't just going to ignore the call from the Wall Street Journal. And I released a statement talking about diversity and equity and inclusion, and first and foremost, to me, the way I was raised, that begins with diversity of thought. Apparently that's not what my bosses thought, but I knew at that moment that was a turning point, and that once I do that and go against my bosses, that things are gonna change. But fortunately, I had a contract. 2021, everything continued to go south, in my opinion. Disney was one of many companies that forced a vaccine in order for us to keep our jobs. We had until September 30th, 2021 to be fully vaccinated or you're gone. And I just wanted to know more. I wasn't anti-vax, I just wanted a little more time. A simple Google search told me that it usually takes 6 to 9 years for the FDA to approve a vaccine, and this was in 6 months. And when Donald Trump said it, we're not gonna touch that. But when Joe Biden got in and said it, then if you don't, then you're evil. So it didn't take much for me to connect the dots to realize that this wasn't about saving lives, and I just didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do something to my body, my choice, right? Sometimes. So I asked my agent, and they said, you're gonna have to do it. I asked my bosses, you're gonna have to do it. One of them said, you know what, my agent, you can do a religious exemption. And I said, but that's not the truth for me. It's just wrong to force someone to do that. Why am I gonna make it up? And they said, well, you can get out of it. Or you can do a medical exemption. I'm like, but that's not true. Like, I wanna do this for the right reason. I don't agree that you have the right to tell me. Maybe I should have. I chose not to, and to stand by my reasoning, and they said, do it now or you're fired. So as a now single mother of 3 kids, one already in college, I knew that I had to do it to support my kids, my family. But that night before, I couldn't sleep, and I just prayed, and I said, Lord, tell me what to do. Give me a sign. Smack me upside the head, because if you are gonna tell me to walk, then I'll walk, and I'll figure it out, and somehow I'll find a job, and I'll support these kids. If you tell me to take it, I'll take it too. And I woke up the next morning, and I got in the shower, and I had this bathroom that needed to be renovated. It was so ugly. The marble was this swirly brown ugliness. And for some reason, when I was in the shower, I opened my eyes, and that ugly, swirly brown marble, I looked in the same spot I did 10,000 times, and it was an angel. I saw that marble with an angel, and I'm telling you, that angel was moving, and I was breathless, and I thought, that's my sign. Go ahead, do it. You're gonna be okay. I got dressed, and I drove to the pharmacy. It was in some grocery store, and I sat in the car for 10 minutes crying, saying, what am I doing? Look, I am caving. What a loser I am. But I'd been given the sign, and I walked in, and the nurse looked at me, and she said, sweetheart, are you okay? And I said, no, I'm being forced to do this to my body, and I don't want to do it. And this sweet woman looked at me, held my hand, and said, this is so wrong, and I'm so sorry. And when she put that in my arm, my life changed. Something in me changed, where I knew that, number one, I caved to do what I thought I needed to do at that moment to support my family. And number two, never again. So I drove home, and I had previously agreed to do a podcast with Jay Cutler, the former Chicago Bears, Denver Broncos quarterback, and it was a favor to a friend who said, he just started his podcast and he needs a woman, will you do it? Okay. So his research team did a good job, and we talked about many things that ended up being controversial, but the one I'll focus on now is my opinion on the vax. And it was a warm day in Connecticut in September, and I had a short sleeve shirt on, and I had just come from getting the shot, and there was a Band-Aid on my arm, and he asked at first, he's like, hey, can I talk about the vaccine stuff? I was like, sure. He brought it up at that point, and he said, what is that? And I laughed, and basically I said, I think it's sick and wrong for any company to force their employees to do something to their body. However, I need my job, and I love my job. And here we are. Those words did not sit very well, I guess I should say, with Disney. And as soon as the podcast dropped, I got many phone calls from agents, from bosses, and said, basically, you're in trouble, and we're taking you off the air, and we're suspending you, and we're taking your assignments away, and you're gonna issue a public apology. So it's interesting, I look at Jimmy Kimmel, I look at a lot of people right now who said all kinds of things, and all I said was, I think it's wrong that someone forces me to do something to my body, but then I complied. So it's interesting how people pick and choose, and at that moment, the fear came back, because I realized me being true to myself while complying was not okay. So I was suspended, taken off the air, all my assignments taken away, and darkness and fear, and the internet crushing me. I was already a sellout and not black enough and a right-wing nut job and all the things. And then on top of this, I was done. And then while I was suspended, I got really, really sick with COVID, of course. To the point that one night, I was up all night, my heart was beating through my chest, and I'm like, what is happening? And I literally thought I was dying. I'd never felt like that in my life. And I said, hey, this is it. Again, I'm divorced, I'm alone, I'm sick, so the kids are with their dad. And I said, I gotta take myself to the hospital. And I woke up, I hadn't showered in 3 days. I had to take a quick shower, and when I stood up, I fell over, and I collapsed. And I realized that if I got in the shower and fell again, I'm alone. No one will find me. I'll die here, potentially. So I got back in bed, and I prayed that I'd wake up the next morning. And if God woke me up, I would never disappoint him and never give in and never cave again. And I woke up. But what I don't ever want to forget that moment of darkness and fear and reading all the hate and all the things that then what happens is you start to believe it about yourself. Maybe I am a sellout. Maybe I should have stayed quiet. But it's wrong, but my body, my choice. Like all of these things, and they make you doubt yourself, and it works. And fear, and fear, and fear. And eventually I went back to work, and the bosses told me, your coworkers are mad at you and they're disappointed, especially the women. And so they brought me back in with fear. And my mom and dad, during the suspension, during being very sick, despite my dad having not one but two kinds of cancer, going through chemotherapy at the time, they came and they picked their little girl up off the floor and they said, you're going back to work and you're not gonna let them win. And that first day back off suspension, my dad huddled up, the old football player and my daddy huddled us up. And he said, we're gonna say a prayer. And it was St. Michael the Archangel for all my Catholic friends, people who follow St. Michael in the audience. And this is the part that I always remember. Defend us in battle, be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. And from that moment that I went back to work, to my last day at ESPN, 22 months later, every single day when I drove in, I called my mommy and dad. Yes, I'm 52 years old and I still call them mom and dad. And we prayed that before I walked in that building every single day. I felt like I was protected and in a bubble, and I know now that I was. I actually did my best work from that moment there to the day I left, because I knew that I was protected. The fear lessened. And as I was silenced during that time, and after, certainly, when I went back to work, because then it was just like, shut up, I need that paycheck. I realized my coworkers, their voices got louder and louder and louder. And as I stayed silent to keep my job and begged for my assignments to eventually come back, my coworkers could go on an NBA show and talk about how disgusted they were that Roe versus Wade was overturned on an NBA show. Or let's have a moment of silence for the alleged Don't Say Gay bill in the state of Florida on a women's basketball show. So I'm confused. I'm here just talking about my body, my choice, but complying with your rules on an off day on a podcast that has nothing to do with ESPN, but then we can go on ESPN airwaves to talk about abortion and all these things that, frankly, when you go to ESPN, is that what you want to hear? You're going for football, you're going for basketball, you're going to yell that the Titans are probably not going to make it to the playoffs again. You're going to do all of these things. That's what we're there for, to listen to you. We're your shrink for that, not for everything else. And I just didn't understand. And as they allowed them but continued to punish me, I said enough. And I called a friend, Chris Harrison, who also ABC, Disney, The Bachelor host, just married me 2 weeks ago, who also got canceled by the left. And he said, I have someone you need to speak with, and it was my attorney. I'd never hired an attorney in my life, but I learned a lot. And I realized there is a First Amendment pillar in there a little bit, not with the government, et cetera, it's a private employer. In the state of Connecticut, what we didn't know is that you are protected, that you can actually criticize your employers if you are complying with their rules, and I was. But most importantly, it was the principle. It was the principle that you allow some to speak up and not others. Which one is it? I follow your rules. Pick one. So I decided to file a lawsuit. Fear. They're gonna hate me, they're gonna get rid of me. I would too if someone was suing me, I guess, but at the end of the day, why? And I knew at that point it was bigger than me. I'm gonna be long gone. But what about all my other conservative friends who didn't have the platform I had, or didn't have the financial security that I had, who would come up to me in the bathroom and whisper and say, please, please, please keep talking. I knew I had to do it for them too. And the night before the lawsuit dropped, I went to each one of my kids, one in college, two in high school, and just said, this is what's coming, guys, and I'm so, so, so sorry. I am so sorry. But it's wrong, and I need you to know that you don't have to defend me. If your teachers and coaches and other kids' parents come up to you, as they had before when your mom spoke up, just tell them, I don't agree with my mom all the time, but she has a right. Diversity of thought. And I have 2 daughters and a son. My son's in the middle. He should be sainted because of the 2 sisters. And each wanted a different reaction to what was to come. And my son, as I said, I'm so sorry, buddy, for what's coming, but I gotta do this. My son looked at me and said, Mom, it's about time you stood up for yourself. He was 17. So what we do as parents quite often is what? We stay quiet to protect ourselves, but more so to protect our kids. We don't want to embarrass our kids. We don't want them to have to suffer from things. We don't want to lose our job. Very valid reasons, but what are we doing? We're telling our kids to stand up and be strong and do the right thing when we're doing what? The harder right versus the easier wrong. We're quitting, but then we're setting a terrible example for our kids while expecting them to do better without setting that example. And I knew then that even though it was the ultimate David versus Goliath, little old me versus Disney, even if they crushed me and bled me dry and it would take all of 2.5 seconds financially, I was gonna win because my kids, they saw that Mom finally stood up. I had no idea they were watching the whole time. So know that as you choose to stay quiet, it is so costly. And now we know better than ever. September 10th, 2025. We knew before that. We knew before what happened to Charlie. But now we know better than ever. We cannot afford to not show our kids how to do it. And to do it the right way. Not the ugly way, but to stand up for what is right. I'm gonna speed through the rest because I have 65,000 examples of how I failed and how I lived in fear and didn't do the right thing. But this one almost cost me my life. 3 weeks after the lawsuit was dropped, I was covering the PGA Championship in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Southern Hills, and I had just gotten off the air, and we were walking along the 3rd fairway, and we wanted to follow, and I've been to a lot of golf courses. I know how to cover golf. We were along the ropes, and they were covering the top group, John Rahm, Colin Morikawa, Scotty Scheffler, world number 1. And we were in the woods, and we were 280 yards away, and we couldn't, far enough to not hear someone yell "4." And all of a sudden, out of the trees, I had turned. A golf ball came from 280 yards away at 150 miles an hour and hit me, direct shot on my mouth. And it hit me so hard that it ricocheted back into the middle of the fairway. Somehow, I didn't pass out. I was alive. But this wasn't so cute. This didn't look, long story short, 8 teeth, 3 root canals, 4 months of trying to get it fixed. And as I'm on the ground, waiting for the cameras to pass, that's what we were doing, waiting for the cameras to pass, hiding. I couldn't believe I was alive. I was afraid to pull my hand away from my mouth to see what was in there or wasn't in there. And I heard voices. I know that sounds crazy. I heard good on one side, and on this side, I heard people laughing. I was envisioning Twitter, all of my former friends who told me how evil I was for all of the things, and saying, look, that's what you get. That's what you get for speaking up. Stay in your lane, girl. For a golf ball to hit me, it's crazy, right? But in my mouth, the thing that got me in trouble, I sat on that ground and I was like, Lord, I am sorry. I'll shut up. I promise never again. Never again. I'm done. I'm done. And then I got to the hospital and they started to try to fix all this. And I realized, no, let's look at this the opposite way. He kept me here for a reason. I knew then that if I'm gonna survive that and only lose 8 teeth, then what am I here for? Like, that is a miracle. People die from, if I had been looking at my cell phone for 1 split second, that doesn't hit me in my mouth. That hits me where? Eye, temple, I'm gone. So I had to flip that, and I realized, oh, no. He saved me for a reason. A couple of months later, I was asked to do something I'd never, ever done before. Pray out loud. I love that I was raised Catholic. I love the traditions. It is something that I believe in the Catholic Church we've got to do more of, is to pray out loud and to not be shy about it. And when I'm asked to go to a NASCAR race at Texas Motor Speedway to give the invocation in front of 100,000 people and live on Fox, I was like, nope, absolutely not. And then I realized I had to say yes. And it took me 2 weeks to come up with this 34-second prayer. It had to be 34 seconds because there was a flyover and then the broadcast started. And I was like, I can't do this. No. I wanted to run. And of course, my dad said, hard or right. Don't preach it, but not practice it. So I memorized the prayer, and as I'm walking on stage and they introduced me and the jets were coming because I had 34 seconds, my mind went blank and I forgot everything. And I was like, this is like 1,000 times worse than hosting the Super Bowl or the NBA Finals or anything else. I wanted to vomit. And I just stood out there. I came to my spot and I held the microphone and I took a deep breath and I closed my eyes and I said, Lord, just guide me. And I somehow, for the first time I ever prayed out loud, besides grace at dinner, right? Somehow it all came back. Every single word I wanted to get across came back in exactly 34 seconds. It was in the window that Fox wanted. I did it, and I walked off stage and I sobbed. It was one of the biggest, best accomplishments of my life because it was finally not being afraid to show my cross, to speak it, not just wear it. Because it's pretty, it's easy to wear it. But are you actually gonna speak it? And up until then, I had not. I'm going over, I'm gonna wrap this up. August 14th, 2023 was the day that I settled my lawsuit with Disney. I was devastated, I was sad, I was excited, I was angry, I was scared to death. Again, fear. A year later, I got my youngest through high school. She went off to college. I had all 3 kids in college last year. That's why I needed that job. And I was done. I knew I had done it. And I wasn't an empty nester. I was a bird launcher as a mother who worked and got them off to school. And now it was time to start from scratch. And I got my car from Avon, Connecticut. I sold the house. I sold everything in it. I drove 1,300 miles, sobbing most of the way, and started over at age 51. Not what I thought my life would look like at that point, to be doing it alone. And literally, I think I played this song 86 times along this drive. Francesca Battistelli, yes, we love her. The song is God is Good, and I wrote down the chorus today, and I'm not gonna sing, I promise you. Joy comes, tears fall. I'm learning there is goodness in it all. It's not hard to find it, you just have to look. God is good. And for those 1,300 miles, what kept coming to me was all the different times and beautiful moments that I had, including when I fell on that floor and thought I was maybe not gonna wake up the next morning, including when I was canceled and crushed and called all the names and called a racist and a sexist. It's amazing what they come up with, isn't it? But I realized during that drive that God had always pulled me through. Every single time, He had a plan for me, even at the times when I didn't think I deserved it. And on September 14th, 2024, which was a year and 5 days ago, I got to my condo, which I had bought during COVID, best thing I did, and I was alone, and I was like, I could do it. And then I got a phone call. And all of a sudden I'm on a campaign trail with Donald Trump. What is happening in my life? I don't want politics, I don't want any of this. And then I'm on the campaign trail with Tulsi Gabbard, and we're in North Carolina, and we're hugging hurricane victims who'd been left behind by the last administration. And I'm doing town halls, moderating town halls with Donald Trump and J.D. Vance leading up to the election. And I'm at the inauguration. I'm on Trump Force One on the Monday night of the election. For the last 2 hours, from Grand Rapids, Michigan, down to Palm Beach on election morning, I am sitting across 2 feet from Donald Trump. And I had to take a deep breath and just try not to sob, thinking of what would have happened if I listened to the fear, listened to the doubt. All of that crap was worth it Because not just because of the cool things I got to do, because along the way I got to meet people. This is the reason I got to meet people who also had lived in fear their entire lives. And to show them it's never too late. It is never too late to do it, not just for our kids, for our neighbors, and for ourselves. It's okay to do it by yourself. Because actually, even though maybe physically you're alone, we are never alone. No more doubting, no more living in fear. God has us even when it doesn't feel that way. So today, we have to see the joy and the beauty in it all. Just like Francesca Battistelli, I'm convinced she wrote that song for me. We have to be intentional with it, with seeing, with doing saying things on purpose the right way. Sometimes doing what's scary. Can we put the Cadet Prayer back up? I need you to, can you say it with me? Help me, make us to choose the harder right instead of the easier wrong, and never to be content with a half-truth when the whole can be won. You know who did that? You know who chose the harder right? Every single time. Charlie Kirk. You know who did it also? And who's going to continue to do it in the most beautiful, powerful, noble way? Erica Kirk. What did Charlie say? Charlie said he wants to be remembered for his faith and how he led. How do we want to be remembered? I know we've all been asked that question before, but with the events of the last couple of weeks, we have to ask ourselves, it is not too late to stand up and choose the harder right instead of the easier wrong. I know you can, and I know that you'll kick my butt if I don't do it. Please, you know where to find me. Thanks, y'all. God bless. Thank you.